We're talking with John Lee, author of 23 self-help and therapy books, including Growing Yourself Back Up. Ricky Douglas, the creator and star of the play Meet the Medranos, is a huge fan. In her play, she plays herself from the ages of 4 to 40, so literally growing herself back up. You explain that no adult should ever experience the helplessness of childhood again. And when an adult does experience this helplessness, you describe it as regression. What is regression, and what is growing yourself back up?
Well, emotional regression is an interesting phenomenon that happens to people all the time. It's a unconscious return to our histories. We don't mean to go there, but something triggers us and reminds us of a time or a place or a person. And therefore, now we're reacting to the present person as if they were the past person. And the present person says, my goodness, where is all this coming from? And the answer is, more often than not, my past. It could be my 30s, 20s, teens, or childhood. Regression is a feeling of being small, feeling little, and feeling less than the powerful adult that one normally can be.
Ricky was afraid to sing as a child, which is remarkable that as an adult, she wrote a musical. During her play in San Diego, which was very successful about a year ago, she says that she was just trying to get through the songs without fainting. Now, after reading your book, she says she's singing as an adult while allowing her inner child to come out and play with grace. In this case, Ricky turned regression into a positive thing. What is the difference between positive and negative regression?
Yeah, I talk about that in my book, I think, and I certainly do in my lectures and talks. The last chapter in that book is called The Grace in Regression. And so it's a good thing in that opportunities are continually given to us to work on our past traumas and our past pain and losses. So that's a good thing. But also there's good, quote, good regressions. When I started this work, I went to a restaurant in Alabama, and when I walked in there, this smell took me right back to my grandmother's kitchen. And for, an instant, I was a little kid in my grandmother's kitchen, which was a really good regression. But most regressions equal regret. Most.
What does that mean?
I'm going to say something, do something, behave in a certain way that I'm going to regret, maybe for days, weeks, or even decades. That's because I've left my adult prefrontal lobe, neocortex. I've gone back to my limbic and reptilian brain. And now the only three options I have during that time is fight you, fly away from you, or freeze until everything is over. And that's when we do some emotional damage.
Ricky was adopted, and she addresses the issues of adoption in her play. How does a person of adoption experience regression differently?
Well, the main way is that I teach this and have for decades, that everybody in Western European society especially gets abandoned numerous times as children. Not maliciously, not by intent, but just by the fact that you can't hardly raise a child with two parents, let alone one parent. So there's going to be times intermittently when the small child feels like they've been left. Well, in an adoptee situation, they have been left. See, and then they have the benefit, hopefully, of getting adopted, but then there's certain abandonments that happens in that too. So in a way, what I've told people who have been adopted that I've worked with over the years is you sort of got a double instead of a single. You know, my mom and dad did abandon me in certain ways, certain times, but the adoptee got abandoned by two folks. And that idea of I'm not wanted, I don't belong here, why am I here? That question tends to haunt the adoptee for all their life. And there's something about not connecting. See, when children are born, boys and girls, 7 out of 10 look like their father initially. And that's so the father can see the child and see him, and then they bond with it more likely. But what most of us didn't get, especially my age group, didn't get was bonding. What we got was bondage and being held in bondage to dysfunctional families, usually.
In her play, Ricky talks about how she was told to lie about her Ecuadorian heritage and pretend to be Swedish as a child. How is this type of dysfunction something that would lead to regression, and how would somebody deal with that?
So, what we all do is we create a persona that tries to help manage the disappointment, the dislocation, the distance we feel between others. And yet, again, in her case, if she hadn't have been adopted, she would have still developed a persona. But because she was adopted, she developed another persona. And so those layers, those masks, are multiple, like many of us, and those masks have to be pulled off one layer at a time.
I want to share a moment that Ricky and I experienced recently. We were at a restaurant and the waiter was being short and impatient with us. In the moment, we were able to stop and say, since we both read the book, wait a minute, let's not regress with him. And it totally changed the dynamic of the situation. From that moment forward, we had pleasant exchanges with the waiter. Can you talk a little bit about how regression loves company?
Yeah, yeah. And regression is contagious. You know, if I start regressing, you're going to start regressing, and then Ricky's going to start regressing, and then before you know it, the whole universe is regressing with us. So that's one thing. Yes, we do love company, and we will pull people into our regression. Now, one of the things that y'all did, and which is what I've been teaching for 30 years, is not how do you get rid of regression once and forever, but how do you catch it sooner than later, more and more and more, so that you, again, do less damage and create less stress. So y'all caught it. But the other thing is that, you know, everybody knows this on some level, is energy, like water, seeks its own level. And so if he was stressed and tired and run down and it's the hardest job in the world, again, y'all might rise or sink down to his level, but y'all rose up and then he accompanied you, see? And that really is how energy works most of the time, unless the person is so regressed that they just can't adapt to the energy around them.
The tagline of Ricky's play is, feeling different? Play anyway. How might reading your book help somebody to abandon their fears and pursue their dreams?
Well, kind of like what y'all did is you work with the material enough to catch your regressions, but more often than not, that requires some deep, deep emotional work. I've been saying for years, you never want to give up the ability to be childlike, but you want to give up every opportunity to be childish.